I'm going to call this meeting of the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Authority to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Chair Craven?
Here.
Director Nauman?
Here.
Director Kelly?
Here.
Director Borchard?
Here.
Okay. Director Borchard, would you lead us in the pledge?
Stand and face the flag, hands over your heart. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda review. Is there...
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I have one request. We had a board member request that item number 5 be continued to a future meeting.
Is that okay with the...
Agreed.
Okay. I heard one agreed. Okay. We have 2 agreed, so that's fine. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Then, if there's no objection, we'll so ordered to approve the agenda as presented, with the exception of number 5, which is being moved to a later meeting. Public comments. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to us on something that's not on the agenda? Seeing no one come forward, I'll ask for board member comments.
I've got a few.
Okay.
Some good news and interesting news. One is our lake is going to be close to filling this year, not maybe over the top yet, but we're about 71,000 acre feet at Lake Piru, where it holds about 80,000. So we're about 10, 11 feet from spilling, and we're hoping it gets up to the top and just stops. The other thing of interest is we mailed out our Prop 218 notices for our rate increases at United, and the number that we're looking for up to a 46% increase, which really is a big number, but it basically has to do with a lot of environmental studies, reports, and studies that have to be done to keep what water we have, so we don't lose more for fish and other items. Another item of looking forward as we're working as United with the great project with the City of Oxnard to use that great water for ag and possibly injections. That's still moving forward. Nothing's firmed up, but moving. And in that same subject matter, the GMA needs to kind of, in the future, take a look at how the City of Oxnard is going to receive credits or something in balance with this great project water that has to deal with ag and or the industry or the area out there. So that's just something in the future that we need to kind of put on the docket to see how that's going to work for the City of Oxnard and the users of the water.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all I had today.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Consent items. Well, actually, it's consent item. Approval of the minutes.
Madam Chairman, I move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and second to approve the minutes. Well, actually, the consent calendar, which consists of the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? So ordered. Informational item, Las Posas Basin Plan Specific Groundwater Management Plan Status.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Brian Bondi, United and GMA. Happy to give you our regular monthly update on the process of developing a basin-specific plan for the Las Posas basins. I believe I have some slides that we're waiting on. While we're waiting for those, I'll just note that at the last GMA board meeting, I gave you an oral update on what was talked about and accomplished in March. My board letter also summarizes that. Also in my board letter, I promised that I would give an oral update on what's been discussed during the 2 April meetings that we've had and give you an overall schedule update, so that's what I intend to do orally at this time. I want to just give you an overview of the issues and where we're at in terms of developing approaches to addressing the issues. First, we'll talk real briefly about the West Las Posas Basin. The West Las Posas Basin, we've estimated that we have a natural water supply for the aquifers on the order of 12,000 acre-feet per year. We have pumping that's in excess of that to the tune of 13 to 14,000 acre-feet per year, rough numbers. What that means is we have an overdraft on the deep aquifer system of about 1,000 to 2,000 acre-feet per year. That overdraft has manifested itself in a pumping depression in the eastern part of the West Las Posas Basin. This is the 118 here. This is the Santa Clara River, Camarillo. These depressed water levels in this area are a concern because anytime you have depressed water levels, you have the potential for inducing water to flow into that area from areas that may have poor quality water. So that's the concern there. What does this look like over time? Historically, we've seen declining water levels in that pumping depression area. In the mid-90s, we saw the declining water levels turn around and rise. That was due to taking approximately 2,000 acre-feet per year of pumping offline. This was part of the in lieu delivery program associated with Cayugas Municipal Water District's ASR project. This is how we know that the overdraft in the basin is on the order of 1,000 to 2,000 acre-feet per year, because we know that this kind of turnaround was the result of 2,000 acre-feet per year reduction in pumping. What we've seen now since the end of the in lieu program is water levels have turned around and started to decline here. This is obviously the concern of what could happen going into the future here with the dash lines, and that's what we need to manage. Today we talked about an initial potential goal for the basin plan for this area of trying to maintain water levels above this historical low point, and you can see that the projection we have under current conditions may be out to 2020 or so until that would happen. So this is our possible initial basin objective for that area. East and South Las Posas Basins. We have a different story in the East Las Posas Basin. It starts out with declining water levels over time, which we saw in the early part of last century until about 1970. And had that continued, we would have seen further declines. Eventually wells would have gone dry. We would have had increasing pumping lifts. We would have had pumps needing to be lowered, water quality problems, and eventually potentially dry wells. What happened in the East Las Posas Basin instead, though, is we saw the influence of discharges from wastewater treatment plants in Moore Park and Simi Valley, which introduced a large amount of water into the basin and actually infiltrated and made up for the overdraft. And so now what we have is basically an area of the basin on the south side that's filled back up with marginal quality water that requires treatment for most beneficial uses. In terms of the water budget for the East and South Las Posas Basins, we have on the order of approximately 15,000 acre-feet per year of natural yield. This is water that's available through precipitation and natural runoff. We have pumping that exceeds that on the order of 4,000 to 7,000 acre-feet per year. That's our overdraft for the deep aquifers. But what we have in this basin that we don't have in the West Las Posas Basin is the marginal quality water that's come into the basin and made up for that overdraft. And above and beyond that, there's potentially some available for supplemental for new demands on the water source. So basically, in a nutshell, what we have here is a water quality management issue where we need to reclaim this water from the shallow aquifers, clean it up, make it available to offset the overdraft on the deeper aquifers. Long term, the marginal quality water that's entering the basin from the upstream discharges may be reclaimed by upstream users, and a worst case scenario would be that we might be able to just get by on what's available. And this is based on a set of assumptions about what Simi Valley might do in the future with their recycled water that they have available to develop as a resource. So you can see that under the worst case scenario, with existing pumping demand, we would be right on the edge. So what's the plan look like? Where are we heading? We've developed 3 planning horizons, a short term. What are we going to do for the next 5 years? The logic behind that is we really can't do much different because we do not have the ability to discharge the brine that's generated when you reclaim the shallow groundwater. Medium term, let's say 5 years to 15 years after the SMP has, the salinity management pipeline has made it into the basin and we have the ability to reclaim the shallow water, we're going to have a different set of actions available to us. And then longer term, beyond that time frame, we'll be looking at additional projects to increase the ability of the natural runoff to be recharged into the system. So our short-term goals are fairly simple, straightforward. This is what we've been talking about. At some level, preventing the increase in additional deep aquifer pumping while we're getting the projects online, and manage water quality through blending. And this would be blending with imported water. Medium term, we want to develop the shallow groundwater system so that we have a reliable supply and improve water quality. And long term, we have the same goals. How are we going to do this? Short term, in the first 5 years, we're going to be looking again at blending and potentially having some interim pumping criteria. These might be a cap, might be a new allocation system of some kind. We haven't decided what that's going to be. We're also going to need criteria for Cayugas for their operation of their ASR facility to make sure that we protect against impacts to local pumpers. During the first 5 years, we're going to have laid out an overall framework for the medium and long-term periods, but we're all going to need to fill in some blanks, some details that'll go into what those strategies will be in terms of who's paying what are the allocations, so on and so forth. So we'll be continuing to work on that. And that would ultimately take the form of some sort of management plan update. I say 5 years here on the plan. It could happen sooner. We haven't decided what that looks like. Medium term, we're going to be desalting shallow groundwater to replace deep pumping. We're going to be working on longer-term management strategies for projects that take a long time to implement, such as stormwater retention facilities and things of that nature. And ultimately, long-term, we would implement those projects as needed to enhance the natural recharge, to increase supply, and to improve water quality. In the meantime, the group has some tough issues to address. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but there are a number of difficult questions that need to be addressed over the next several meetings. How are we going to limit pumping on the deep aquifer while we're in this interim period before we have the ability to develop supplemental supplies? How are we going to address new demands? How are we going to address the blending and the ASR operations? So unless there's any questions, I'll talk briefly about the schedule. There's a copy of it, item 2D, in your agenda packet. We don't necessarily need to flip to it, but suffice to say we have about 5 months left on our schedule to get to the point where we predicted or scheduled to have a basin plan completed and agreed upon by the stakeholders. I've been accused by several of being overly optimistic. I'll go out on that limb again. I'm still very optimistic with the progress the group's made. We're largely on schedule. I think people are working well together. I think we have a good foundation, and it's a reasonable expectation that we'll be able to put a plan together that won't have all the answers, but it'll lay out a framework, a path, and a schedule for filling in those answers and get the ball rolling down the road of managing the basin. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Pardon? No. Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to receive and file the progress report?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Okay, quarterly water supply projects update.
Okay, item 3 is our quarterly water supply projects update. We've been doing this now for, just short of 2 years, inviting folks to come tell us what's going on in their neck of the woods, what they're working on, and what the overlap is with the agency. And today, we're going to have United Water talk about what's going on in the district with a focus on a project that we've been working on, a seawater barrier pilot well project. And this is a project that would be the first step in evaluating the feasibility of implementing a full-scale seawater barrier for the Oxnard Plain. So I'd ask Jim Kentosh to go ahead and come on up and give that presentation for you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Good afternoon. I'm Jim Kentosh with United Water, and I'm pleased to talk to you about this project. This is an actual in-the-ground project that's going to help the process of bringing the aquifers into a long-term balance. So it's our seawater barrier pilot well. Let's see. You've all heard of the GREAT project. It's a joint project with the city of Oxnard. You've heard plenty about that. One part of the GREAT project is the seawater barrier that Oxnard has proposed. This project will be a partnership between United Water and the city of Oxnard, and we're going to start the project with a single pilot well to test the concept. This is a map of the Oxnard Plain showing what the ultimate facilities of the barrier project might look like. The AWPF is Oxnard's wastewater treatment plant where they're purifying the recycled water. There are going to be, ultimately there may be pipelines that supply that recycled water to Pleasant Valley County Water District, as well as the PTP irrigation system. And along that pipeline and to the south, there would be a series of injection wells that would ultimately inject recycled water and a blend of recycled and potable water. Oh, and the pilot well project is the first step of that, and that's shown in orange here.
Excuse me, Jim.
Yes.
Could you tell us, go back to that other slide?
Okay.
The blue dots are future injection wells, I take it?
Future injection wells, yes.
And what corridor is that along?
That is Wainimi Road, and that is Highway 1.
Thank you.
And that location is conceptual at this point. That's what we kind of picked for our first look. But ultimately, one of the purposes of this pilot program is going to be to help pick where we're actually going to site future wells.
Jim, what's the projected water injection number, acre feet or gallons?
For the pilot well, we're using 2,000 acre feet a year for the pilot well. Up to 2,000, that's probably a high number, but we're using that for our studies at this point. So the purpose of the pilot well is to inject potable water, not recycled water, to start with. We're going to collect data on how that affects and benefits the aquifer. That information is going to support permitting for recycled water that's going to be required for injection. It's also going to help us site future wells. And the duration of the pilot program might be around 5 years, possibly less, possibly more. This is see if it all comes in. There we go. This kind of shows the conceptual level of the pilot well. We say pilot well, but there's going to be multiple casings where we're going to be injecting into several layers, and we're principally focusing on the deep aquifer at this point, not the shallow aquifer. And this is an overall map showing the location of our first pilot well along an existing potable water system, the OH system, and we have a lateral called the Ocean View lateral here, which has some surplus capacity for that purpose. We've purchased the site, we've acquired the site along Wainimi Road, and it's just a few hundred yards to the west of Rice Road. The source of the water is going to be the El Rio well field, which is located on the Oxnard forebay, and we're going to pump water through our existing OH facilities to the injection point. Approximate capacity shown here. We might have a pumping capacity of 1,500 gallons a minute and 2,000 gallons a minute injection capacity for a total estimate of 2,000 acre feet per year of injection. Now, this slide is intended to be a very simplified illustration of what the benefits of the pilot program are. The pilot program has benefits, even though there's no recycled water involved at this point. And if we understand, of course, the Oxnard Plain is really a confined aquifer, and things are a lot more complicated than this. But this is a simplified picture which shows that the groundwater levels on the Oxnard Plain have been lowered by pumping, and they are lower near the coast. But in general, you have a higher water level in the forebay area than you do near the coast. Even though the two track very well, you have a higher, and it's the water level here at the coast that draws the seawater in and causes the intrusion. This project, in essence, will pump water from the higher water level area near the forebay and inject it towards the coast, which will reduce the gradient of water, drawing seawater in, and hopefully reduce seawater intrusion. So even though it's a small project, at least on paper, it has benefits of its own. One of the questions that we're often asked is, what are the benefits of potable water injection versus recycled water injection in the future? And I've got a few slides here to illustrate how that works. The pilot program is going to pump up to 2,000 acre-feet of water from the forebay and inject it into the South Oxnard Plain. So what we have is 2,000 acre-feet coming out here and going into the ground there. With recycled water, you might deliver 2,000 acre-feet to the southeast Oxnard Plain for injection or in lieu recharge. In exchange for that, there are credits distributed back to the city of Oxnard. They pump out of the forebay, and so you have the exact same situation. You have 2,000 acre-feet of water being pumped out of the forebay and being injected into the near the coast. So the benefits to the aquifer are the same, whether we go with potable water or convert to recycled water in the future. You all have seen these maps. Our groundwater department has been out doing seismic surveys of where the latest version of latest vision of where that seawater and brackish water has intruded. And so the question that came up is our well site still good? And indeed, based on that mapping, it looks like we've by coincidence picked a very, or at least by our foresight, picked a very good location for the pilot well. And also, the borehole that we drill for the pilot well will provide useful information to support those seismic studies. Now, one thing that's important to notice about this project is that it's not just going to be pure injection. We're also going to install pumps and motors so we can pump water back out. The reason we do that is we have to backwash those wells. Even though the water we inject is clean, over a period of time, the wells will slowly plug up. So what will happen is when we start the well up, the injection rate will slowly decline with time, and we can recover that by backwashing and pumping water for a brief period of time to waste. And one of the purposes of this pilot study is to study the long-term effects of that backwashing cycle and see if we recover the injection capacity that we need as a result of that. And we're going to get a chance to try different backwash cycles as well. But the important point is there's going to be pumping capacity as well. And of course, since we have to backwash, we have to put that water somewhere. So we've been talking with Cayugas Municipal Water District about using their brine line as a discharge location. Turns out that the brine line is located in Wainimi Road, within 100 feet of our pilot well site. So we're going to use that. And people ask, why are we bothering going through the trouble of hooking up to the brine line? Why don't we just discharge to a ditch? The reason for that is we want to be ready in the future when there's recycled water available, because we won't have to get a new NPDES permit to discharge to the ditch. Cayugas already has the NPDES permit for discharge of recycled water through this line, so it kind of lets things gets things ready for the long-term future. Every once in a while, bad things happen. This is a pipeline break we had about 10 years ago. That's actually a person there, a break in our OH line. One of the options that we have for this pilot well is to use it as an emergency backup supply for our water customers in the south here. We can close a valve here and inject water in to serve these small mutual water companies that have no other source of water. That would happen fewer times than once a year. We'd have less than 50 acre-feet a year. And we already have GMA credits. We would use our existing GMA credits for that. So this is just for information only. Once we convert to recycled water, this option would go away because we can't put recycled water into a drinking water system. Now, of course, United is interested in protecting the aquifers. We're not doing this to develop more water for ourselves, but to protect the aquifers. And we are going to place limits on when that water can be pumped. During droughts, will not, if we think that the forebay is going to be affected, we will reduce or halt the amount of pumping. When the available storage in the forebays is greater than 80,000 acre-feet, that's the point at which groundwater starts coming in from the ocean. We would stop pumping. And if we have high nitrates in El Rio, or if our deep aquifer wells are in use, which they're high in iron and manganese, we would halt the injection program. So we're working with the GMA staff to formalize what this plan would look like. We have started the CEQA process for this project. It was included in Oxnard's 2004 Great EIR. That EIR is a little bit stale, so we're starting supplemental CEQA process, and the GMA will be involved in that. But we're doing CEQA just for potable injection only at this point, because we have not made a final decision on recycled water. Rough schedule, we hope to have the document out for public review in July, start injection around 2012, and after 5 years, end the program in 2017. So one of the reasons I'm here talking to you today is that we are going to need the GMA's help and authorization to make this project work. The water that we're going to use for this project is coming from the El Rio well field, and although we have the GMA allocation and credits for that well field, they are all spoken for by our existing customers, Oxnard and others. And so we need to be able to pump water out of the forebay and inject it into the ground here, and have you folks authorize us to do that. The simplest view I could come up with to explain how this works is that we are pumping water out of the forebay and putting it back into the GMA near the coast. So there's no, except for a minor amount of backwashing losses, the net change to the aquifer should be approximately zero. So we're going to need your approval for not needing credits to do this project. We'd also like to ask for a resolution of support because we don't want to do a project like this without GMA support. We'd like to begin the dialogue now because we don't want to wait until when CEQA is done, we want to start drilling the well right away. So we've started discussions with GMA staff who have been helpful. So the next steps is we're preparing a study plan on exactly what kind of information we're going to collect during this program. We're going to determine what our limits on pumping are going to be, work with GMA staff to draft a resolution, and prepare CEQA. So, any questions or comments?
Are there any questions? Steve?
What kind of data are you going to have, baseline data, to be able to tell whether this is working or not?
Well, United has been collecting data for many, many years, so we have a lot of good information on the coast, on water levels and water quality. And we are, as the program progresses, we will make a determination of what data we're going to collect and where we're going to collect it and start in advance of actually injection. So we don't have the study plan completed yet.
If everything worked perfectly and under perfect conditions, we'd take 2,000 acre-feet out of the forebay and you'd see a rise in the water level.
We should see a rise near the coast, yes. That will tell us a lot of information.
And the goal is to try to simply get the water level to rise at the coast.
We want the water level to rise, yes.
Fresh water level. Right. Looks like you got somebody who's got some...
No, I'm here as moral support.
All right, great.
Any other questions?
I have one. What's the reason for doing the EIR on potable only and not including the recycled part of it?
Recycled water injection raises a lot of issues that we have not fully addressed at this point. When you inject recycled water, any well within a 1-year underground detention time would no longer be able to serve potable water. So if there are wells that are serving domestic service for a farm or we don't know who, injecting recycled water would affect them. And we have not, in order to make a determination on what those effects are, we have to have a working groundwater model and we have to have the data. So, so if we were to do CEQA on recycled water injection, we don't have the data to support that at this point. So we're going to do CEQA on potable injection, and then that will support us getting the recycled water injection if we just make a decision to do that. CEQA supports the decision made by a governing body, and our board has not committed to injecting recycled water at this point.
And my second question was, what type of or level of treated great water would you anticipate putting into the injection wells? Would that be a potable standard treated water, or would that be perhaps a lesser degree?
No, it would be what the AWPF is going to produce. The Advanced Water Purification Facility by Oxnard is going to produce some incredibly high quality water. The TDS is going to be under 30. If you look at the list of constituents that they're anticipating producing, it's going to be very high quality water. I don't anticipate that we're going to blend anything back with the untreated water. It's going to be, what I understand from Oxnard is it's going to be pure, very highly treated water. This stuff is treated with RO and ultrafiltration and a whole bunch of other stuff, and it's going to be good water.
It would seem that if it were being put back into the ground and mixed with groundwater, there could be a lower level of treatment and reduced cost.
Well, Oxnard has determined what level of treatment they wish to provide, partly because of the customers that they have in their system, and I don't foresee that they're going to be able to produce 2 levels of treatment and still meet their other customers' requirements. So what we're planning on now is what the current plan is for the AWPF. They're building it right now. Concrete's being poured, everything's being built to this standard that they've set, and it's a very high standard.
likewise, I would think that if they were providing great water to ag customers, they wouldn't have to treat it to such severe potable standards either.
You know, ag would probably be happy to take less water than they're getting with this, they would be getting with this great project, yeah. It's much higher. In fact, one of the things that we've discovered is that this water is so pure that we actually have to add stuff back to it because it would plug up the soils for the growers. So we were looking at that issue too.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if the board members are finished, I have just a question to ask.
I'm sorry, what?
If you're finished, I have a question.
Okay.
Jim, 20 years ago, in my capacity down at Channel Islands, we were looking at this same thing, and I remember visiting Orange County's Water Factory 21 or 28, which was one of the pioneers of not only using reverse osmosis, but injection barrier wells and reclamation use and what have you. And two things about that visit. One, we were, asked by the individual over there afterwards if anybody was willing to step up to the tap after the recycling was made pure through that and drink it. And of course, in my B.T. Collins moment, I did. And the only discernible problem is the loss of hair, but I'm still here. But more fundamentally, in terms of the orange water, the problems or the challenges that confronted in using injection barriers, two critical things came up that I just offer for your consideration if you haven't already. One is the extraordinarily difficult dynamics of the underground aquifer system that they were dealing with, and there was the greatest gap between what they thought was there and what actually was there when they started actually doing the injection. So their sort of take-home lesson is spend a considerable amount of money up front to evaluate that, and you'll get the benefit later.
And that's why we're doing a pilot program.
Yeah, exactly. So if you haven't already talked to them about this, I would suggest you might want to revisit them. I understand conditions are different, but they spend a considerable amount of research time and money on this very process down there.
Yes, we have been down in Orange County.
And the second dynamic that they had, which, is something that's evolving, is the extraordinary role of the economics, because the high-quality water that's being used for injection is costly to get to that point. So there's a longer-term economic model question that has to be grappled with that I know you're aware of, but it's certainly one that we asked them what's the lessons learned, and those were the two biggest lessons they came out of that process with.
Well, I can assure you we are looking very closely at the economic question. Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I was just wondering if you're going to bring this before the Oxnard Plains Users Group again before it actually tries to occur.
We are planning another Oxnard Plains Users Group meeting, and I'm not sure what the latest status on that, Mike, John?
We haven't set a date, but Mike and I we're going to try to wrap it in with a great discussion.
Yeah.
My memory serves me that there was some unhappiness with this project, and so I was just wondering if you were going to try to get the local users behind you before you plow forward.
Okay, well, obviously, yeah.
I'll take that one. Hi, Mike Solomon, United Water. The unhappiness is the concern was why are you injecting water instead of just directly delivering it to us? That would take the pumping off. The farmer's concern was instead of injecting it, give us the water, then we don't pump and it creates the same thing. The injection barrier becomes important because farmers can't take water all the time. This plant's going to be producing 24/7, and there are going to be times where you can't provide that water, so you have to have an outlet for this water. You can't shut off the plant. This is part of the other beneficial use of the GREAT program, and so I think we've gotten past that concern. I think the bigger concern when we get to the injection barrier will be the GMA. Where can you put wells near this injection? We don't want everybody all of a sudden putting wells right there next to the injection project and reducing the benefit of it. So I think we've addressed that issue.
Well, everything that would come from nearby wouldn't have to go on a purple pipe anyway, would it not?
Everything would have to be marked purple. Yep.
But so what you're currently proposing would be more of a alternative use on time when surface deliveries could not be made?
Yeah, right now the priorities of the GREAT program as we try to develop the project with Oxnard would be direct deliveries to Pleasant Valley County Water District in the pumping trough pipeline and any other of the Ocean View folks if we can get that hooked up too.
The second option would be the injection barrier. The third option would be there's a purple pipe that runs up to a river, near the River Park area, near the Farrell property that you all dealt with us with recently. We would work to extend that purple pipe into either the Farrell or Noble pits for percolation recharge into the forebay, because part of this whole thing, and I think Dan brought it up earlier, is the GMA is going to have to set the policy on how does Oxnard earn credits, how much credits, everything through this, because part of the reason they built this plant was not as a sanitation or wastewater, it was for future water supply. So they're going to be pumping out of the forebay. So some of that water that we're putting back in the forebay would help replenish what they're taking out. But the reason it's the third priority is we don't want that water going up and taking the space of where the natural surface river water would go also. So there's three options where you have to, there'll be a whole process for where we put the water at certain times.
And Mike, while I have you captive still, following up on what Gerard was saying, my memory, did United not have an injection well in the Wainimi area before, or am I wrong?
The city of Oxnard had an injection well that they operated in the early 90s, I believe, and DWR also in the 60s. It was quite a long time ago. Tried some injection programs, and but those were never really brought to any fruition.
Yeah, well, I had more of a memory of them being quite a failure, but maybe our memories are quite not similar. It's just, we're having an awakening in the Las Posas that sometimes it doesn't work exactly as we had thought it might. And I'm wondering if that might not be what's going to happen here.
Well, and I'd add back, Dan Nauman mentioned our 46% rate increase. Not all that rate increase is for environmental studies, the stuff we have to do. A large part of it is we've invested a lot in Tony Morgan, our relatively new, he's been here a couple of years now, department manager for groundwater. We've added a geophysicist to our staff. We've put together a 3-year plan to start really looking at the geology, the formation. That's why we're doing this project, is to see how much will the formation take, where will the water go. Tony's group is going to be monitoring that really close to see, does what's out there will accept a good injection barrier project or not, or would it be a waste? We have to know that so we can start planning ahead. You need to know the geology, so no matter what we do, we put projects in the right place. And that's what Tony's group, and that's driving a big part of our rate increase this year too. That's information we haven't collected for over 30 years, and it's time we get that information. As the water, we've taken care of the low-hanging fruit on the water, we got to start taking advantage of the other water now.
The advantage of using your potable water now is that you're not destroying the future use in that area until you actually finally inject.
Well, and you can't inject direct recycled water. At this point, we couldn't even inject the recycled water, even though it's cleaner than what we're sending the potable water. They won't let us do that.
Right.
So we have to do this, and then eventually you can blend. And our hope in the future would be that folks would see that there's secondary, tertiary treated water. This is like 5 times treated water. This is ultimate water. And the hope is they'd eventually say, that is such good water, you can inject that 100%. But
well,
part of what this project
you can hope in this hand and you know what in this one, and all comes out the same difference.
Yeah. Very good.
Any other questions? Yes.
Just to add that, Mike, with this caption of tagline of recycled water, there's different, like Mike just mentioned, you have tertiary treatment and other levels of treatment. You look at what City of Oxnard has done, what the Orange County has done, it's a much next step to really almost super water. So it's what to do with it, how to do it. So it's in that area where we have the seawater intrusion. Anytime you get the wells off the system from pumping, you have less pressure being put on the seawater coming in. So it's a combination of figuring out what to do, how to do it, and be efficient and effective to get the bang for the buck. And that
Thank
process.
you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, is there a motion to receive and file?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objection? So ordered. Irrigation allowance index rollout schedule and update. I forgot my glasses. That's why I'm having a hard time reading.
Good afternoon, Chair Craven, members of the board. I'm waiting for the slides to open up here. But for the record, my name is Rick Birgutz. I'll be presenting the item today. It's item number 4, Irrigation Allowance Index Rollout Schedule and Update. Just a quick recap. In January, Dr. Stiles was here, and he presented the results of what he called the Task 2.2 report. And what that report described is a new approach for the agency to allocate water based on efficiency. Although you'll recall, we don't call this new approach irrigation efficiency anymore. We call it the Irrigation Allowance Index. His recommendation and your board's recommendation was that we move forward with option number 1, the Irrigation Allowance Index. And at that time, staff provided 4 approaches that we should consider. Your board essentially said go forward with 3 of them, come back with more information on one of the 4th approaches. Those, by the way, were approaches that Dr. Stiles recommended that had to do with additional work. And we're also providing a more detailed project schedule, and it will continue to get more detailed as we move forward. So I'm going to go over a few things that we're working on and give you an update. One has to do with weather station relocation. That is something that, of course, Dr. Stiles recommended. We have sent a request for proposal to Investment Signals. Some of you know the company name as David Peak. So it's David Peak's company. And that is asking that he provide us a price to relocate the Edding Road, Camarillo, and Moore Park weather stations, basically put those in locations that represent standard CIMAS areas. We're also asking that he add standardized evapotranspiration and computations to the 5 weather stations that he operates. And we've also asked that he provide a separate cost for not relocating, but locating new locations for the weather stations. In June, we expect to bring a contract to you or a proposal to you for your consideration, which would allow him to move forward with that work. Just for your reference, of course, this is a map of the GMA and the weather station locations. The ones that we're talking about relocating are Edding Road, Camarillo, and Moore Park. And the other thing I wanted to point out is Dr. Stiles talked about how moving forward we will want the state CIMAS stations to be the primary CIMAS stations that the agency relies upon for its ET data. Here's the Oxnard CIMAS station, the Camarillo, and the Santa Paula station. One thing you'll notice right away is the Santa Paula station is, of course, in Santa Paula. It's not in the inland Las Posas Valley. But he's determined that the weather data from this can be used in the inland Las Posas Valley. Also, one of the things Dr. Stiles talked about was that the CIMAS stations may require upgrading. And frankly, I'm stuck on this. We need Dr. Stiles to talk with the state's CIMAS coordinator. I've talked with the state CIMAS coordinator. He feels the weather stations are working well. And he hasn't talked to Dr. Stiles. I'm doing the best I can to facilitate that. Dr. Stiles is in the Philippines right now. So we'll get that handled. He is also aware that Dr. Stiles is recommending that the Oxnard CIMAS station be relocated. But the state CIMAS coordinator isn't exactly sure why. So again, they need to talk about that. The CIMAS coordinator, his name is Robert Fastenau, by the way. We've also talked with him. In the event David Peak is not able or willing to locate better siting conditions for his weather stations, the CIMAS coordinator has offered to help us find locations, which would be another possible outcome of this. And we'll be looking at those in May or June. Public outreach. We mentioned public outreach would be required in January when we talked to your board. Our current thinking is that we'd have 2 workshops this fall, probably August and September. We thought about September, October. We know October is very busy for some of the strawberry growers. The thinking with the fall workshops would basically be to advise the growers that there will be a change in 2012 with the new system, and we want them to be aware of it. In May, we'll look at getting meeting rooms reserved for those fall workshops, and we'll provide a special workshop for those, or a special notice for those workshops. Now, we weren't planning on doing any workshops during the year 2012. Certainly we haven't ruled it out, but our our thinking is that we would then have 2 more workshops in January 2013 when the growers are finally faced with filing under the new system. And those workshops would be in January. We'd also send out a special notice for those, and we would essentially train people on how to do the filing. The other advantage to having the workshops is we'll be getting information from the growers. Do we have enough crop categories? With the current approach, we've upped the crop categories to 24, which is amazing considering what we had been using. We might find in the workshops that we need to add more crop categories, and we have a way to add those in. Ordinance changes. Of course, the ordinance will have to be updated. What we'd like to do in June is provide a red line strikeout draft to your board of the proposed revisions. Your board might want to refer it to the Strategic Advisory Group for evaluation. We're allowing time in June and July for that, and the thinking is that in September we would provide a notice of a public hearing and then adopt the revised ordinance code in September 2011. Agency software revisions, of course, those will have to be complete by January 1, 2013. So in advance of that, we'll provide a scope of work to county IT services in September. Plan on bringing that back to your board in October for consideration, and providing that work is funded, we would shoot for doing the testing February through April. Now, additional ITRC work. This is one of the things your board asked us to come back and give you more information on. One of Dr. Stiles' recommendations was to do quality control for the first year. We think it's a great idea. We've invested a lot of time and effort into this new program. His quality control of the way the weather stations are working, some of the calculations, or I should say the actual comparison between the state systems and the peak systems, and also looking at how the rainfall is measured, are all going to be helpful to have him work on with us. The other thing that could occur during that first year is we might talk with him about revising crop categories or adding crop categories. That type of need could come out of the workshops. But you'll see we also have a line item from him, a recommendation from him, that we have a specific approach to modify the crop categories. I'm thinking that we roll that into the quality control for the first year, but we can talk about that. Either way, there would be a scope of work for that in October with consideration from your board in December. And again, modifying crop categories could come up in 2013 depending on the first year of the program. Continued, correct the growing period ETIW by rerunning the ITRC model. Now the ETIW is the crop evapotranspiration of irrigation water only during the growing season, and that's a value that Dr. Stiles modeled, and it's something that he thinks we might need to reevaluate moving forward. And if that's the case, we'll evaluate that need in June and ultimately bring a proposal to your board to fund that work. We're not recommending a study of irrigation efficiency at greenhouses right now, which is something Dr. Stiles thought we might want to do, and also using the metric satellite system right now. So in conclusion, the level of effort is going to pick up in May, and it'll remain steady through the rest of the year. We will provide you regular updates and also be bringing you action items. We'll be posting a project schedule online that will include workshops and the key steps that we're going to be relying on to make this happen. And we expect to see you in June with the proposal from David Peake's group to relocate the weather stations. And that's all I have, and if there are any questions, I can answer them now.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Rick, the meetings, the fall meetings are intended to educate growers on the use of the program?
Yes, and I'd back up a little bit further. Educate them on the use, how to fill it out, yes, but also to make them aware that things are changing.
Okay.
And that it's an approach that the agency has decided to move forward, and we would describe why that new approach is being taken. I wouldn't want any growers to be surprised that a change has been made.
Correct. Okay. So that my suggestion would be to be kind of clear when you're advertising those meetings on the purpose, that it's not just a change is coming your way, show up if you want to hear about it, but we're also soliciting opinions about
Crop types.
Those kinds of things.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other things?
Yeah, Rick, in the beginning, I thought we were going to get a printed copy of Dr. Stiles' reports, and I don't think we ever got those. I know you posted them. Could we get a printed copy so that I don't have to sit with a iPad in my bed reading this damn stuff?
Sure. I'll get you a printed copy.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to receive and file?
So moved.
Second.
Any objection? So ordered. Okay, action items. Number 5 has been moved to the following meeting. We hope to have a full board present. Supervisor Bennett told me that he received a call and something was urgent, so he had to leave right away, just for your information. Item number 6, proposed resolution number 2011-2, storage program for United Water Conservation District's Sanacoy Wellfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Gerhard Hubner, Watershed Protection District. My pleasure to present this resolution as well as this item. Starting with a little bit of background, the purpose of this project or this need for the storage program, United completed their Sanacoy Wellfield back in 2005. The wellfield adjacent to their spreading grounds. This was to pump down the recharge mound that result from wet years. It allows more groundwater recharge to occur, as well as allowing this pumped water to be delivered to their existing agricultural pipeline system and their PTP through their pipelines and their customers. It also has the effect of reducing the lower aquifer pumping in the overdrafted areas of the Oxnard Plain and Pleasant Valley basins. Location map, what we're talking about here, if folks need to get oriented where the Sanacoy spreading grounds are in relation to the El Rio spreading grounds, and how it's conveyed across the plain, including the Lake Piru and San Felicia Dam, and then an aerial shot of the Sanacoy spreading grounds, as well as the well fields identified in blue. Moving on, there is an existing GMA resolution, 99-3, that does provide an allocation to pump when mounting conditions occur, and that's the key point. This well field provides, as I mentioned earlier, to further reduce pumping on the Oxnard Plain. Since 2007, when the well field went into operation, United has extracted and replaced approximately 9,400 acre-feet of pumping with the stored surface water. So we have this well field. They've been pumping since 2007, but we have some unresolved issues. Unfortunately, back then, there was no allocation established for that Sanacoy well field. The resolution that I mentioned earlier, 99-03, only applies when mounting conditions occur. Thus, the records in our database show potential surcharges, negative credits due to the operation of the Sanacoy well field. Subsequently, in the last, I would say last months, but even going back several years, we've talked with United staff at length. How do we deal with this? And we concluded that a storage program made the most sense. Thus, we recommended that United address this lack of allocation by applying for an agency storage program pursuant to our ordinance code. We did receive an application from United that's included as part of this package, item 6A. Describes the method of the operation, including the storage, quantity, quality, planned storage of the program, its injection and extraction, and what they plan to do with the extracted water. demonstrates that the storage program is consistent with our groundwater management plan, provides net benefit, that there's no net local or no local impact caused by the pumping of the well field. They propose to extract less water than is being stored, and that the shallow completion of the well field prevents drawdowns that would affect other wells within the forebay. And they'd also do monitoring to make sure that there wouldn't be any unanticipated changes in groundwater levels. So we did evaluate that application, deemed it complete, and we concurred with the approach. They laid out some proposed conditions which we agree are appropriate. They lay out the proposed storage term, including a 2-year limit on recovery of stored water. The 2-year limit was proposed by United, was selected based on the possibility that there may be years where they need to carry over storage from the previous years. Jump right to it. These are the conditions that were proposed. Oops. And they are included as part of the resolution that's before you today. No net detriment, state water project not eligible. These are released water from the Sadakoi spreading grounds, temporary 2-year storage time frame, the extractions from the 4 Sadakoi well fields, and then be some annual reporting. So with that, we are recommending that you adopt proposed resolution 2011-2. Again, that's attached to this board letter, and we create a storage program for the United Sadakoi well field retroactive to 2007. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
And of course, there's United representatives that could answer any detailed questions that I wouldn't be able to answer.
I don't hear any questions. Oh. Yes.
Not sure who I would address here at United. Perhaps it's Mike or Tony, but how is it proposed that you will try not to cause detriment to some of the other wells in the area?
You go back to...
There's a general statement here on one of the slides that there'd be no detriment to
You go back to the map.
Other forebay wells. How is that going to be achieved?
Yeah, that's a good question. What you'll see on this map, the purpose of this map was to show where we currently monitor. The 4 blue wells are the pumping wells, and you can see here they're basically right on the berms adjacent to the spreading grounds. So you can see that we're capturing the water that's going right in the ground there. But what you can see here in green are local private wells, some on the Butler Ranch, Jim Lloyd Butler Ranch, and elsewhere surrounded. On top of some of those, you see a red square. That's where we currently monitor groundwater levels. So you can see that we pretty well are monitoring just about everything in the vicinity of where we'll be extracting. We do have the ability to monitor these Butler Ranch wells as well. So we have a monitoring program in place to monitor changes. We do baseline monitoring. We also monitor while we're pumping the wells.
I think what David's also asking is, what's the protocol right now for running the wells and then when to turn them off, or if there's a red line or baseline? I think that's part of his concern.
Thank you for giving me the verbiage protocol.
Assuming that
I
was
was looking
correct.
for, yes.
You want to talk about protocol, Steve? The other thing about the wells is they're
We're
self-limited.
being taped or
Okay.
fed on. Could everybody, as you come up, just identify yourself, please?
Certainly. Steve Bachman, United Water. The wells are somewhat self-limiting because they're in the shallow part of the aquifer. They aren't drilled that deep, so when water levels drop, they can't be pumped. So they have a kind of automatic switch on them for that. So that means that you really can't, have significant effect on the basin. So they're mostly used when water levels are pretty high.
How deep are they?
They're shallower than all of, they're 100 to 150 feet, something like that, pretty shallow.
That's right about the depth of ours on Rose Avenue.
Are you seeing any effect?
No, but we've seen water degradation. But I don't think that's your fault. I think that's Santa Clarita's fault.
Because of the shallow nature, this is all non-potable recovery, is it not?
Yes.
Because the storage time was so short, too.
Well, it's not, it's all being used for
Right.
irrigation.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, we're asked to adopt a resolution.
One more.
Yes.
So I heard that the wells are self-limiting, but I still didn't really hear a protocol about when you'll stop.
I think when they break suction, is that not the definition?
Pretty much.
I guess the protocol I'm looking for, or looking to hear, is a physical level. I mean, is it or is it a time of year consistent thing? Clearly, when you guys are sending water downriver and you're doing a lot of percolation, then you're going to have mounding, and then. But other times when there is no water coming downriver, I'm just thinking about folks in the area, and if there's any ramifications. Mind you, I fully support what United's doing there. I think it's a huge benefit to the county and particularly the west part of it.
The question is, don't you already have an 80,000 acre foot, not only you have the wells, shallow wells, yeah. Before that, they can't pump anymore. The wells will dry up. There's water level monitoring that's occurring, water quality monitoring that United does, as well as the county. And we do water level measurements as well. Submittal of the annual report will document some of these conditions, and then they have their self-limiting 4-bay, 80,000 acre feet.
And water's being put in the spraying ground.
It's not, timing-wise, they're not used all year round. It's a seasonal usage, and at some point, the downstream, whether it's the PT users and/or the Pleasant Valley users, they understand when they're receiving Santa well water and when the surface diversions aren't going down the pipeline. So I mean, it's not. I don't have a. Mike, do you have a number on how often it's used, or a rough number? Seasonally, or Jim, you have a time frame on those Santa wells?
It varies a lot. Yeah, it depends on water conditions and everything else.
The other factor is they're not allowed to pump any more than they spread. They have to show that at least a 1-to-1 correlation or less.
Mike Solomon, United Water. Yeah, as Gerhard has pointed out, we really only use these when we get the mounding, so we can try to move a little water out, open up some space so as more water is available, we can use it for recharge, and then that water is used to send water out to Pleasant Valley County Water District, and mainly the pumping trough pipeline that we have 5 deep aquifer wells. We'd rather keep those wells off and use this 4-bay water. The other key thing is they are very self-limiting. They're so shallow that we almost hardly ever use them. I think the only time the most recent use was when last summer PV needed water. We had a choice. We could turn on a deep aquifer well up near El Rio and back some water up to them, or we could pump this. We pumped them for a little while, I think 1,000 acre feet or something total, and then they hit. We couldn't pump anymore. We had to shut off the well field. So. Like I said, they're just pretty limiting, and we're only using the water, less than the water that we're putting into the 4-bay.
Does that answer your question?
Does that help? I think it's important to know that these wells were built with a Prop 13 grant. It was identified, and it is being operated as a groundwater management project. It's not to provide more water out to the east Oxnard Plain. It was to keep that mounding up so that we could move water around, and when water was available, like this year, the last few months, we have no place to put all this water that's running down the river. I'm literally telling my folks, put it in every hole and crevice you have right now, but a lot of it's leaking back out to we need, if we can draw that down at certain times, we can be taking advantage and capturing more water while moving it out. That's the main purpose of this project. But when we pump it to do that, we have no allocation, and GMA then wants to ding us for $6 million of penalties when we're managing the water and moving it out. It just didn't make sense. That's the big issue.
You have another speaker here.
Frank Bormanchenko, Real Plaza Water Company. Just a question. regarding the fact that this water is being pumped and used for irrigation purposes. Shouldn't there be a credit coming from those people who are using that water back to cover this production? That would probably do a lot for, the credit buildup that we have. It's just a question. I would think there would be a credit that would be coming back to cover this production.
Somebody answer that, please.
Well, the program is proposed here. There's no allocation, so there's no credits being created. It's a one-for-one, and thus I don't have to do the credit balance. Looking to take credits off from another operator, well, that's usually a contractual. We've talked about that kind of issue with perhaps some of the PTP customers, but that's a contractual relationship that United has with their PTP customers, and we didn't feel that's appropriate for us to intermesh with that contractual relationship. So we don't advocate taking credits at this point, at least as part of this program. That may be something that we want to look at if and when a credit policy comes to your board in a future date.
Yeah. Just to add to that, right now when we provide surface water out on the Oxnard Plain, there's no credit. We're delivering in lieu, so we deliver it out to the farmers. That's where part of the concern's been, is they're building up credits. And back in 2001, GMA and United, we tried to develop a project where we were capturing those, so no credits were building up. That system didn't work. And so I think several years ago, many of you remember the issue where we transferred some water from our Good Deed Credit Trust to wipe out the penalty for that issue, because we were operating one way and the GMA was operating another. This is trying to resolve that. Ideally, any of this water we deliver out, nobody builds up credits. That's a whole different step, a whole different process that has to occur now. When we deliver it, going in there and saying, okay, you farmer A, B, C, D, you transfer credits to United for that. It becomes that may be what we're going to be doing on our pumping trough pipeline, actually, is we're going to try, we have contracts with each of them, and we will be asking for allocations on those, or credits to offset any deliveries we give to them.
Since this water is immediately below your settling basins, this is just you're pumping from the deeper part of your pit.
All it is surface water that went underground and right back up. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to commend the staff for putting this together. I know it's been a long process to get it to the wordsmithing, making sure the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and working with United. I haven't been touching everything, but I just understand it's been in the works for a while, and I commend you guys for writing a wonderful resolution. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion for Resolution 2011-02.
Adopted?
Adopted, yes.
Okay.
And I second that motion.
Motion and a second. Did that include to receive the report? The A part of the recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Is that included in the second? Okay. We have a motion to receive the report and to adopt the resolution. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objection? No. Motion carries unanimously. Item 7, agency annual reports for calendar years 2009 and 2010.
Madam Chair, it's my pleasure to also present this item. I'll be relatively brief. I do have a few slides, and I'll jump right into it. These reports are required as part of our enabling legislation, AB 2995. This year we completed 2 reports. If you recall, in the past we've been essentially 18 months behind in producing reports, partially because it's when the data is available to us and we compile the information. We made a concentrated effort to get caught up so that the reports wouldn't appear stale, and we have that for you today. These reports describe our technical, administrative, fiscal, and groundwater management activities for each calendar year. So let's start with this slide. This is our comparison with annual rainfall and our groundwater extractions. So for 2009, if we jump ahead, we had 142,292 acre feet of extractions. For 2010, we had 120,537 acre-feet of reported extractions. Taken an average over 5 years, we're averaging about 130,000 acre-feet of extractions. As you recall, 100,000 is our safe yield target. Over a 10-year period, it's 124,000 acre-feet. In the reports we do have, and I encourage you to look at them. We have distributed copies to you. The report is also available on the website for folks that would like to look. Figure 6, this is the ratio of reported groundwater extractions per each basin. In terms of irrigation and efficiency filings, we've included Figure 8 for 2009, 146, dropped to 129 for 2010. So a little bit of declining trend over the last couple years. Credits, this is where the total is as of today. There's been a little bit of tailing off in terms of our cumulative positive credit accumulation, getting close to 700,000 acre-feet of credits. Some of the highlights as listed in the report. We did, and you recall all these, so I'll try and be brief through this, but we did have our 2 historical allocation reductions that occurred, one in January 1st, 2009, and the last one last year that completed the 25% reduction. We had a couple ordinance changes, 8.1 and 8.2, with the flow meter calibration requirements, as well as civil penalties for noncompliance in other areas, as well as other changes. We had Emergency Ordinance D adoption, created a moratorium, a new well drilling, an upper limit on irrigation efficiency allocations for the Los Pozos Valley groundwater basins. As you know, this is, as Brian gave an update earlier, to allow the development of a site-specific management plan. And your board has extended that several times. We've been working on a database upgrade. Phase 1 is essentially complete. Phase 2 is close to being complete. Public outreach, we had a road show and 4 special off-site workshops. You heard a report from Rick. You adopted the Cal Poly San Luis Obispo Irrigation Training and Research Center reports, Phase 1 and 2. We had a number of resolutions for 2009. There were 6. We had our penalty system created for flow meter calibrations. We had enforcement guiding principles resolution. We had our Strickland Mutual Water Company settlement, and I think we reported last meeting that they complied with all of that. So that was a win-win. You adopted the surcharge in later part of 2009, and in 2010 you also had 6 resolutions. 3 I put up here. Resolution 2009-7 that facilitated the United's purchase of the Faro Pit. We had our GSAP program, which was established with guidelines, criteria, and funding. In fact, we'll be bringing some of those agreements to you either at the May or the June meeting for the folks that were decided to they're eligible. And then in the latter part of 2010, you established the tiered surcharge rates that went in effect in January of this year. Some additional highlights. I'm not going to go through these unless you have a question, but we are also actively looking at the wells, keeping track of them, which ones are active, inactive, which ones are destroyed. We also have well installations, repairs, as well as well destruction. So for each of the years, we track those as well. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. This is a receive and file on this particular item.
Any questions? Comments? Motions?
I'd like to go and make a motion to receive and file.
Second.
Motion to receive and file the annual reports for the calendar years 2009 and 2010. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
And we appreciate getting caught up on this. Item number 8, the agency's 2008, 2009, and 2009-2010 biennial financial audit reports.
Good afternoon, Chair Craven and members of the board. For the record, Gerard Kapusik with the Watershed Protection District Agency staff. It's my pleasure to provide you the fiscal companion of the two periods of time reports that Gerhard did, and might be useful to place this in context. If Gerhard has provided you with the substantive scriptural Old Testament, I'm providing you with the fiscal New Testament for these two periods of time. In that respect, we'll go very quickly. We have just a brief set of slides that will capture. Essentially, we just want to confirm the statutory requirement and why we are on a biannual schedule, and give your board the opportunity to either confirm that or move to an annual audit schedule. Currently, we are completing a biannual schedule for the 2 years mentioned. We'll highlight 4 fiscal forensic factors in each of the 2 years, where really gives you the essence of the fiscal performance of the agency on an audited basis. Just give you a brief milestone of cost for audit preparations over the last 3 cycles, and then offer you some recommendations for essentially receipt and file, but confirmation of the schedule. Government Code Section 26909 applies because nothing in AB 2995 provided an additional audit requirement. So by default, as an independent special district, this agency falls under this provision, which essentially tasks the auditor controller to perform annual audits. And that can be done at the discretion of the auditor controller using in-house staff or through consultants. What happens in the county is they essentially do an RFP and pick an independent annual auditor to do our audit. The government code section, however, says we must pay for that level of effort. And so essentially that's what this slide summarizes. How the audit is structured, the minimum requirement guidelines are identified in these publications by the state controller. Functionally, generally accepted accounting standards is the standard of care that our audit requirements are required to meet. Why are we on a biannual rather than an annual? Well, the simple answer is because your predecessor board back in February of 1983, admittedly under a different time when things were less expensive and the total budget of the agency was smaller, asked the board unanimously under this section to go from an annual audit to a biannual schedule. And the Board of Supervisors agreed, and that's the schedule we've been on. And the last go-around we presented to you 2 years ago approximately, the 2007 and 8 and 2008 and 9. And so today we're giving you the next 2 years of audit reports. Ultimately, both in the body of the board letter and in the presentation, there are sort of 4 fiscal forensic factors or metrics we look at. How did we do in terms of year-end revenue? And how do we do in terms of year-end expenditures? Did the agency experience for that fiscal year a gain or loss based on the net of the top 2? And essentially, what are the year-end net assets of the agency? And let me just point out here that in this last factor, these audited statements will differ somewhat from the annual year-end budget report, because when we come to you in the year-end budget report, we're reporting the cash basis for that fiscal year. On an audited basis, the auditor will be booking, for example, settlement revenue on a discounted amortizable basis in the year in which the settlement was concluded, but we will not get constructive receipt of 100% of that revenue for several years. So there will always be that slight disconnect between the audited statements, which are the most credible and auditable from the standpoint of the standards, but the cash basis. So I just want to be sure everyone understands that difference in treatment. For the first of the 2 fiscal years, I've just prepared a table taking these 4 factors and comparing it against the previous year. So you can see that in fiscal year ended June 30th, 29, we received just shy of $2 million in revenues, but almost half of that was the discounted settlement payment for the Howling Nurseries, as well as its surcharge payments in that period of time. Expenditures were about $100,000 higher than the previous year, and that began the ramp up for the annual work plan development and the backlog of costs. The agency experienced an operating gain at the end of June 30th, 2009, of just shy of $400,000. That was a little bit less than the previous fiscal year. And the net assets available to the agency at that time, including these discounted settlement payments, was just under $3 million, $2.8 million, which was almost a doubling of the net assets from the previous 2-year period. And then taking the same table but advancing to the second of the 2 biennial years, As you can see, our year-end operating revenues on June 30th, 2010 were just shy of $600,000 less, but again, that's a function of that booking of the settlement revenue in the previous year. Expenses were considerably higher, reflecting the first full year of really aggressive annual work plan task work that you tasked us to do and to try to get out of that backlog. We did experience an operating gain of just over $400,000. That was $40,000 above the previous 2-year period, but and that's significant that in spite of the increased work plan costs, we still had an operating gain. And the net assets of the agency essentially advanced by $500,000 to the $3.3 million figure, but again, including that amortizable discounted settlement revenue. So we don't all have constructive use of that until several years come by. But on balance, a very healthy statement. Just to give you a metric, this has been the tracking of costs to do the audit for the biennial audit over those last periods. Essentially what happens is the auditor-controller puts out an RFP, selects the auditor, and essentially we then work with that auditor to complete the reports. But you can see they have risen as well, primarily market-based, and to some extent additional gas requirements requires additional work. But primarily this is market-based growth, just what the market is bearing in terms of these audits. So our recommendations after the presentation is for you to confirm a continuation with the biennial schedule or decide to move to annual. And if, based on that choice, receipt and file motion would be appropriate, embedding that policy choice. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, in this day of government transparency, I think we need to discuss the part about the annual and the biennial. So as I understand it here, it says that we're required to perform an annual audit, but there's a provision that allows us to request an exemption for the preparation of the work to have it done every other year. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that is what your predecessor board did back in February of 1983.
Yeah, and here, as I said, I left my glasses at home, but it looks a heck of a lot like 1993 on February 18th? Does that say 83? Below it says 83, but that one says. So did we do this twice or once?
No, we asked for it in February of 1983, and then the board of, I'm sorry, yes,
that
that's
says
correct.
93.
And then March 1st of
83, they approved it, and I'm not understanding this.
Right. Let me be absolutely certain about that.
If you didn't print this stuff in bold, you wouldn't have had the question.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain it's 1983, but I will confirm and get you an email.
Okay.
But essentially what happened is the board asked the Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors agreed. In both cases, it had to be by unanimous action of the respective bodies.
Okay. And so the provision of the law still exists that we can ask for an exemption? And
Well, actually,
that request, can that be done once, 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, or whatever it was?
Right.
Or, well, 20 years ago or 30 years ago almost.
Right.
Or does that request have to be done? Where I'm going with this is, in the recommendation on the agenda as it was posted, and in the initial recommendation, it doesn't mention confirming. It's only buried down in this summary where it says, please confirm the every other year, the biennial audit. I'm thinking that that part of the request maybe should be brought back so we can have more information so we know if we have to confirm this every year, every other year, or if the request in either 1983 or 1993 will suffice.
Chair Craven, I understand your point, and I apologize if it's not as artfully crafted. My understanding, and council can weigh on this, is that the decision to request a biannual audit stands unless you wish to confirm to move to an annual schedule.
Okay, even with all the new rules and regulations by the state and GASB?
I will defer to council, but that is certainly my understanding.
That understanding is correct under the government code. There is no requirement for your board to continually affirm the option of a biennial audit. Also, with regard to the recommended action, my recommendation is if the board is inclined to revisit the issue of biennial versus annual audits, that be agendized for a future meeting.
Well, I was going there for that part of it, and that's before we ever start discussing the audit. But if you wouldn't mind, I would like to have that part brought back to discuss the annual or biennial continuation. Is that?
No, I'm fine with that, but
Okay.
it seems to me a bit excessive to be biennial, but, you know, an annual audit seems sufficient to me.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to.
If they do it every 2 years, it's half the price. Could you go back on the slide, Gerard? The one that showed us the cost, I think it was.
Yeah, that's the part I'd like to discuss in the future.
Okay.
For example,
Those are 2-year fees on each of the fee schedule on the far right. Is that
that's
true?
correct. That's
And
correct.
had this been done on an annual basis, what would your estimate of the fee have been on a per annual basis?
I would say slightly higher than half, but then again, it's market because it depends on the scoping that the auditor controller does. We don't control the scoping of it. We provide input to the auditor controller, but they effectively scope it and then select from the result.
Madam Chairman, I think that's what we need to do, is to find out what the cost comparison
Right,
would be, because certainly, this is not a $24,000 budget any longer.
And what the additional cost because of additional auditing requirements were.
And then
Because the one in 2005, 4, 5, and 5, 6, and then when you get down to 2008, 9, and 9, 10, there were additional GASB rules that had to be followed, which added to the cost.
Yeah. I'm not sure that we can break out from the past, but we'll try to do that because,
If you could give us an idea, at least
Right.
of the additional requirements
Sure.
that had to be done when
Sure.
we bring it back for
Yeah,
discussion.
And for my part, I'm less interested in breaking out the past as I am full compliance with the current concerns that Madam Chairman has.
Well, I can assure you that we're not out of compliance with current standards. It's just a question of your policy choice, whether you want to move to an annual schedule. And if so, then there would be I'm just estimating a slightly higher than half the cost we're spending for 2 years we'd spend for a given year.
Well, I think we've agreed that in order to make the decision, we need to bring it back.
Sure.
And if we'd like a little bit more information.
No
when
problem.
we bring it back for a decision. Okay.
Would we want not to receive and file the report as given and ask?
No, I think
the
we
things
still
be
need to
brought forward?
receive and file this
Yeah,
report.
that's what I'm saying.
I would suggest you just disregard the section on confirming the schedule.
Yeah,
and just
we
proceed.
disregard the part about confirming the biennial schedule. If that's, is there a, yes.
I move we receive and file the report as presented today.
Unless there were questions on it. I didn't even get to that. I jumped in on the schedule. Are there questions on the audit?
No, if I don't think I would ask, George, is, I know you can do this, I don't know if we, at the county level or government level, but you can ask the auditors if they want to do a 2-year bid cycle. So when you come back for an update, whether we go annually or biannually, if we can lock them in for a set rate. But give us some more information to work with.
Even if they're going to do it annually?
An interesting concern, which I brought up before, I'm sad Director Bennett isn't here right now. In the most recent ag newsletter, both in the state of Arizona and the state of Oregon, the states have seized money in state accounts that were assessed on product being produced for advertising. And I would like to remind this board that I still think that's possible here. You know, Gray Davis is looking at the redevelopment agencies for whom I have no love at all, but this group here I have a greater love.
How about Governor Brown?
Yeah, that's a history lesson, isn't it? Yeah.
It's the same. Time flies, but it doesn't change.
What year is this?
I can't resist. Is that an example of all Democrats look alike?
Well, the gray hair, the gray beard, and the gray brain. But anyway,
Hair?
it really is, I mean, it's a realistic thing that's happening as we speak in both Oregon and Arizona. Those were both commodity groups that they seized the money from, and, that was as of last week's newspaper.
Okay, did we have a motion to receive and file?
Yes.
And a second? Okay.
I'll be the second.
Is there further discussion on this? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, Executive Officer's Report consists of six meeting reports and the weather station report. Is there any request for discussion?
Madam Chair, I just want to make one announcement.
Yes.
I attended, as well as several of your board members, the AWA Water Symposium, and at that meeting, we did award our John Flynn Award to Cayugas Municipal Water District. So I want to make an announcement for folks that didn't attend.
Very good. Okay. Any other comments on any of the reports? Motion to receive and file?
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposition?
None.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Duly note the time.
3:02.
This is a tough room.